We'll start our webinar with your story about the eagle. Go ahead.
I was somebody drafted me and made me be a scoutmaster for a jamboree troop in 1989, 88, 89. And the jamboree was in Australia. I didn't want to do it, but my wife made me do it. My troop of boys stretched from the Grand Oregon all the way to Alaska, diagonally across Oregon and Washington. And so I had to go to Alaska. Never having been to Alaska, one of my assistant scoutmasters loaned me his truck and said, drive down to Haines. Was it Haines? Might not have been Haines. Anyway, drive down to the end of the fjord. As I was driving down, I pulled into a turnout. And just as I stopped, a bald eagle came up on the air and looked me smack dab in the eyes. I suffered at that point a life-changing experience. Yeah, since that time, I've been a bird watcher. And later, that same year, in 89, I guess it was 89. Yeah, I was a scoutmaster in my ward. I took the scouts on a camp out in front of the McNary Dam. There, and I lived in Kennewick, Washington at the time. And we set up our tent, and as luck would have it, I had my troop in the tent and my assistant scoutmaster in the tent, and the wind came up and blew the tent down on top of us. Well, I still had stuff to do for my wood badge, so I got up and sat down at a table outside the tent. The wind was blowing and it was chilly. But I happened to look up in the sky, and there was this big bird carrying a large fish, like about 11, 12, 13 inches long. And that bird let go of that fish. And that fish come crashing down and landed right on the corner of the door of my van. And there were some big rocks by. I think that the fish thought he was dropping the fish. The bird thought he was dropping the fish on the rocks to kill it. But it fell onto the ground right there by my van. I ran over to the van, and there it was, this fish. The rest of the day, the rest of the morning, my scouts threw rocks at that fish. The bird flew off. And I think that was a regular eagle. That wasn't a bald eagle. So, and the next day was fast meeting, and I stood up and bore my testimony about life-changing experiences and this eagle falling out, this eagle dropping a fish to fall out of the sky.
There you go. That's our opening monologue for our webinar about telling stories. That's a great story to start us off with. So I'm not sure if anyone else is coming. So just to have some.
That is a.
What's that?
Oh, it's a great story. It's a great memory.
Yeah. So we have this on tape so people can come in and watch it, because I had a few people say they weren't going to come, but they were going to go watch it. I'm going to go ahead and do kind of this discussion and presentation. It'll just be the three of us. We can have this discussion that kind of came about because of a couple questions that people emailed me after last week. So I kind of changed. I pushed the topic that was going to be this week into next week, and kind of wanted to change the topic a little bit and talk about what is a personal history. So I'm going to call up this short PowerPoint thing I did just real quick. So the question is, what is a personal history? So I'm asking you that question. So Robin, Paul, you can answer this. To you, what is a personal history? What is it you would hope to accomplish when you're writing a personal history? Because I realized through the questions that maybe people define that term differently. So,
well, I thought it to be just a story of the traversal of my life with the humble beginnings and the changes along the way that I was not expecting, but that changed and made me what I am, and what I hope what I end up to be, along with well, the interesting stories and some of the things that might be embarrassing, but the hand of the Lord mostly. That's what I'm trying to do.
So you want to share those the hand of the Lord moments in your life as you write your personal history.
Well, the answer is yes, but those hand of the Lord instances are just relatively few and far between. But there's interesting things about how I lived. When I was raised, we were not wealthy by any means. We were right poor, and but there was happiness and joy in our family, and we had a good time. And I wanted to talk about some of those things.
Okay.
I think Robin kind of hit the nail on the head when he said, those things in my life, right? The stories about the things in my life that have shaped who I am. But I love, like, Robin's story of the eagle. Sometimes it's just entertaining stories are fun to have in there too. I'm not sure that having a fish drop from the sky shapes who you are, but it's still a fun story. That's, I don't know, something to share.
So I'm going to
somehow fit those things in with the experiences that have shaped who I am.
Okay.
Somehow I feel that a journal is like a day by day, blow by blow description. And I think mine is just hitting the points. Well, since I'm writing it late in life, it's just the memories that I have, the things that stood out.
I'm going to go. This is something someone emailed me. She says she wasn't going to be able to be here tonight, but she emailed me this in response to the question I emailed out last night. So this is what she said. A personal history to me is a journal. Working on a personal history means you are writing in your journal, which I'm not very good at. Then she said, what I want to accomplish is to be able to write my story and have it printed for my children. And my question is she describing two different things, you think, in that statement? Is she saying that typically she's thought of a personal history as a journal, but she really wants to write this story and it's not to her the same thing?
Well, it appears to me that she hasn't given a reason for why even to do it.
Yeah.
To print it for your children isn't quite the goal. That's not the goal. The goal is to what the children are going to learn from it, I think.
So a personal history includes who's the audience and what are they going to gain from what they read.
Well, I suppose that sometimes you have no idea who the audience is. It's posterity, maybe. I hope my kids read it.
Yeah.
But maybe it's their kids that are going to read it. Or maybe only one or two of them.
One of the things I've thought about with a personal history is that the first audience is me, because I'm going to rediscover some things that happened in my life and maybe look at them in a different way as I write them as a personal history. And as I read this quote, that's kind of what I thought of, is if the first audience is me. But to me, and I guess I'm going to move this slide forward just to, this was the question I was emailed that made me take this different route anyway. Where did I get my desire to share personal histories? And what you see there is my missionary journal, the outside and then inside page. And the reason I put that there is because when I go read my missionary journal, it's depressing. Because I think, Robin, it's what you were describing. It's a list of day-to-day activities, but it really has no impression. It does have a few, but has limited. I did a very bad job of sharing impressions and things I learned and those kinds of things in my journal. And I think I would want my personal history to better reflect those, if that makes sense. And so when he said this question, that's when I thought about this. What's a goal of a personal history? I've started the list. I'll let you help me add to it. To me, one is to honor our memories and to honor the people. If we're writing about an ancestor, to honor them. Another is because it's a first person account. I think, Paul, you talked about this one last week. It's your your first person account of your life that's not told by somebody else and their impressions of you. Other thoughts?
There's somebody else we need to honor, and I hope that it would be clear in my personal history is God, and how God, and I keep thinking of To the Rescue, President Monson's biography, written I think by Sherry Dew. I just think about how that I think it's interesting how Heavenly Father has shaped each of us and prepared each of us for a different role in life. And I think to show how, honor him and show how he works in our lives is kind of cool.
Well, this is a hard question. I think it's the difference between a biography and an autobiography.
Mm-hmm.
Because autobiography, and that's what we're writing here, the first person account, is how I saw it happen and how I feel it worked on me. An autobiography is I've got this crossed up, but it's when somebody else talks about the impacts I have made and how they see what happened in my life and how that caused things to happen.
Yeah.
I guess that's the autobiography. I don't know which one is.
The biography. The biography is when they're telling it. The autobiography is you telling it.
Okay. and I think that those are two different things. I every now and then talk with my second son about his upbringing, and he has a totally different feeling about how I did as a father, as I feel like I did as a father. I hope his is right.
So you get the biographical sketch from him, but you get to write the first person account, the autobiography. Yeah, the discouragement and the hard times and the things that didn't happen right. You know, some of the things stand out as funny that work from both angles. Like the time I was reading the Book of Mormon to my family late one night, I fell asleep as I was talking. They all have a different attitude about that than I do, but we all laugh. That's great. So here's one this is one I think is critically, that I think about a lot in terms of writing my personal history to help me remember the past. You know, it's amazing just in sitting and writing down what stories I might write in a personal history, the things that come to my mind that I never really remembered from my past. And the memories become more vivid. And so to me, that's one of the things we accomplish, or one of the audiences, I guess, as I said earlier, is me. It's reminding me. You think about when you go back to your journal and you read a journal entry about something that happened to you that was one of those spiritual moments, how that helps you recall how your relationship with God developed because you read the experience again and reminded yourself of it.
Well, I think that you have relationships with a lot more people than just God. You have relationship with your sibling, you have relationships with your parents, and then you have relationship with your wife and then your children. And that's dynamic because everything changes. I remember being pretty much in charge of my life before I got married. I got married and then, boy, all bets were off. It took me 1.5 years before I came to grips with that. Then we had a child. I haven't been the same since.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I don't know. I think it's a growth experience, you know, as your situation changes. And that's what you're talking about. These events describe a situation and a response to that situation. Little events like finding something and then building something with it. I don't know where it happened, but I and my brother found a pontoon from the end of an airplane. It was a fuel tank, and I have no idea where we got that. We stuck that thing in the ground and had a fork. We'd climb up the top of this thing, and we could see for a couple of blocks. Why did I have such a thing? I can't remember that, but I remember what we did with it and how it affected us.
That's a good story, and I'm sure your kids if they haven't read about it, would want to. So
Well, they wish I had a picture of it, is what they wish.
that's even better.
Yeah, well, I don't.
So
could probably
I added two more to my list: educating and inspiring those who read, which goes back to, again, those moments that we share with our relationships and with those changes in our life can inspire and educate people and help them on their life's journey. And the last one on here is to entertain and excite. Sometimes they're just funny stories about the pontoon or about the bird that dropped the fish from the sky. And they entertain people and they get them excited, and they strengthen our relationships because people find out that Robin Tuck is actually really funny.
Well, what does a reader do from the things that he reads? Do we apply it to ourselves? Do we look at other people's experiences in light of our own? I think.
Yeah, I know I do. If I read, I might read about someone's experience and think of one I had that was similar, or how something like that might impact me. But I often come to something that I've experienced that's similar, and that's my next step anyway, is to get to that, and that's educational in itself for me.
Well, I wonder also if a personal history isn't an attempt to add some length to our lives, leave something behind us that proves that we were here and that we did something and that we might have been even useful, and have done maybe a modicum of good. Doesn't it add a little bit of immortality to leave something that might float around after you're gone?
That's a great way to put it. I like that. I might have to steal that line, by the way, but
you may have it, no fee. Well, I have to think back about the one we did with you about our first mission, and what one of our goals is to encourage others to go do the same thing. You know, everybody's experience is different, but it isn't scary. I didn't think it was scary, even though we had no idea what kind of world we were going into.
One of the things too, as I think about the books, especially Robin's book, the one on from your mission, is just capturing memories, and because sometimes you just want to capture memories. So you've got their honor memories as a first thing, and I think that's something. I'm not sure why we want to honor memories, why we want to capture and remember those things, but absolutely something we want to do.
Yeah. Well, Spencer W. Kimball said that perhaps the most important word in the dictionary is remember. So I think there's something to that, to those memories that allow us to learn and to grow because of where we've been. So certainly there's value in that. All right. Well, if there's nothing, we've already done questions and answers. We don't need to do that. So next week, it won't be a purpose and a plan for writing. We'll do this again next Thursday, and we'll talk about what we were going to talk about originally this week, which is how do we decide what to write? How do we pick the stories? Do we want to narrow our topic, or do we want to expand it? Do we want to, or how do we decide what stories are the good stories to share? So we'll talk about that next week at this time.
Thank you, Robin.
Well, let me ask one more question before we go away.
Go ahead.
I suppose that one of the reasons I write is because I want to make a difference in the lives of my kids. And I'm wondering how much that matters to try to affect a problem somebody might have in the future. And to show perhaps that there's maybe light at the end of the tunnel.
Now, honestly, to me, back to the question that Sean emailed me and asked me about why I'm excited about this. This is what, and why I'm excited about doing it in a storytelling way. I think if it's written in an interesting and exciting way, and your kids will read it, if they can read short story bursts and get those stories, I think it can accomplish what you're talking about. They'll have something they remember. I think about all the things about my father I never knew, and they're probably recorded in a journal somewhere, but it just was hard to read. But if I would have had some highlights, some stories that took me through his life and let me know who he was, I think there would have been maybe some, maybe not, but I think there would have been maybe some moments that I could have called on when I was struggling with something, to see that he'd been there, someone else had experienced it and made it through. So I think what you're talking about is true. I think as you can share those stories with your kids and they can see that you made it through and are where you are now, they can then celebrate that and try to emulate that and mostly have the perseverance to keep fighting.
Sorry, I only have a handful of stories from my father and his father and his ancestors. It's not even past his own father. I don't have any stories beyond that. And the few stories that I do have of them, I cling to, and they're so meaningful to me. And they have helped me to know. I don't know, it's maybe even given me a little bit of direction, a little bit of confidence in who I am because of what they were able to endure and get through.
Yes, I think that's true. But let me tell another little story.
Go ahead. Love the stories.
One day I was walking. I like to walk in the morning. I don't get much of it done anymore. But I was walking in the morning. I was walking past the MTC. Okay? And in my heart, I was thinking about my father. My father lived a much different life than I've lived. He was a laborer, worked hard, and died young. And so in my heart, I cried out to him, Dad, what do you think of me? Am I okay? And because I know my life is so different. I mean, I work with computers. Computers didn't really exist when he was around. I mean, he had no knowledge of them. And it took a little bit of time for him to respond. But he did respond. And he didn't say much of anything. What he said was, I am with you. And what solace to my heart that gave me. And it's still emotional to me as I ponder it again. I think that kind of a thing that bonds, in my mind, it tied together our generations, mine and my father's. I don't know what kind of impact I'm going to make on my kids. I don't know. But I'm wondering if what I can write is going to tie our generations together.
And that is a great reason why we do personal histories and want them to be something that people will treasure when they read them and want to read. And to me, that's kind of what we try to do at Rememberize, is help people do them so people want to read them and draw that strength that you're talking about, drawing from your father. So thanks for sharing that. That was great. All right. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Robin. Paula, we will talk to you next week, same time, and have a great week.